There we go. We are live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the VertiMax VIVE. I am excited today for a few reasons. The list is really long. I'm going to try and keep it short. But my guest today is the one and only Mr. Pete Homan. Good morning, Pete. Thank you for joining us.
What's happening, Rooster?
You know, and I didn't realize when we scheduled this podcast that it is your birthday today. So as I've always said, I don't know what your secret is, but you look fantastic for 60. And whatever it is that you do, whatever your self-care, healthcare products are, I need to know what they are. So I'm expecting a list or even a gift pack later on of what your secret is.
You got it, brother.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to VertiMax VIVE. My guest today, obviously, is Mr. Pete Homan. His accolades are aplenty, but I'm just going to try and keep his bio fairly short and poignant. He's a personal trainer. He's a physical therapist. He's an inventor, which we're going to get into today. He's the U.S. or former U.S. national Taekwondo champion. How about that? That's a title that not a lot of people can hold. He is a dad, and most importantly to me, a wonderful friend and confidant. So thank you for joining me today, Pete.
Man, I would rather be no place else on the face of the earth than the VertiMax VIVE live podcast.
Well, I certainly appreciate you saying that. So let's talk about some of the products that you've invented. So first of all, the functional training rack. Then we move on to the TRX Rip Trainer. And then we move on to the Nautilus Glute Drive. And most recently, the Escape Barrow. And then as of today, another new product is launched called the Swing Trainer for golf. So, you know, some may confuse you with Russell Crowe and the Beautiful Mind. It has nothing to do with your looks, but it has everything to do with how you think. And I'm just really curious, the big thing I want to talk about today is you seem to have this eye to fulfill a need, right? You can walk around a strength and conditioning facility. You can walk around a gym with your athletes or your clients. And just when you think there's nothing else that can be invented to fulfill a need, next thing you know, you've come up with something. So I just kind of want to start there. Like, when did you notice you had this entrepreneurial kind of spirit and this ability to determine need and notice things that other people can't? Just curious.
It's funny. So I'm at my mom's house, full disclosure. Yep. So at any time she might come in with meatloaf. I don't know. I hope she doesn't come in and interrupt us. But it brought back a memory, which I kind of totally repressed out of my mind. Mm-hmm. And I was maybe 16 years old, and I was really struggling as an adolescent. I had a tough time. I was hanging around with the wrong people, doing the wrong stuff, and wasn't playing sports. And things kind of started to turn around, and I realized I wanted to start strength training. And my dad got me this book, The Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's still a great reference. Like, some of the weeder principles of training, and programming are still applicable today. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so my dad got me this set of weights, cheesy old weeder weights, like the gold plastic with sand inside, and the barbell it wasn't an Olympic standard barbell. It was like a 3/4 inch, tube. And I had no bench. And I said, and all these exercises in the encyclopedia had a bench in there. So I started looking around my mom's garage, and there was some plywood, and there was some 2x4s and a hammer and nails. And I said, I'm making a bench. And I constructed an entire bench out of my own hands. I didn't even take wood shop. I had no clue what I was doing. I was, some of the cuts were a little off, and the vertical pillars that held the barbell, I just cut out some U's in them. 2x4s. And it was great. Now, granted, when I did heavy weights, the whole thing would kind of it was almost like a stability ball, but it worked. And I think that was the first time I realized, you can solve a problem, your mind and logic. So I think solving problems in the industry is what I've tried to do. Whether it was the functional training rack was my first kind of problem that I had to solve for. I was in a physical therapy clinic, and every time I went to go grab a foam roller, there was stuff strewn all over the floor. I couldn't find a foam roller. I couldn't find a Bosu ball, tilt boards. I couldn't find the elastic bungees. And I said, there should be a rack that, organizes all this functional gear. And that was the birth of the functional training rack.
Wow.
And I had no clue what I was doing. I went to a fabricator in Carbondale, which is a suburb of Aspen. And I said, hey, this is a sketch drawing literally on a napkin. Can you start helping me construct this thing? And we built functional training racks. And that was my first URSA, which is a big trade show in the industry. VertiMax, I know, goes to URSA now and again. And this was 2008. And I drove a U-Haul truck with all my functional training racks in a driving snowstorm, by the way, from Colorado it was in San Diego. And I sold out of these functional training racks. Now, granted, 2008 wasn't the best time to launch a product because steel prices went up like twofold. There was a huge real estate crisis, and everybody lost money, including myself. So there's luck and timing involved in these things as well. Mm-hmm. But solving a problem, that's all. The Nautilus glute drive. I'm doing plate loaded hip thrusts. I'm doing barbell hip thrusts. By the way, if you don't know what a hip thrust is, it's basically a glute bridge, which is a gold standard physical therapy exercise for your glutes and hamstrings. It's not like some voodoo or new magic. We've been doing these for years in physical therapy. But somewhere in mid 2000s, a guy by the name of Brett Contreras started elevating his back off the platform on a bench, get more range of motion, and he started loading up with a barbell and weight plates, and so now overload the movement pattern. And I'm sure other people have done it, but he really popularized this, and so it's a great move, big range of motion. So I'm doing it one day with a client. And he says, my shoulders hurt, because your shoulders are pressing into this horizontal bench. And my first thought was, what a wimp, man.
Yeah.
But then I said, all right, he's an older guy. Let me get him an Airex foam pad, and I'll put it behind his back to cushion his shoulders. Mm-hmm. So as he does this fulcruming motion, he's got a little bit of protection for his scapula. And as I was watching from the profile, I'm noticing this Airex foam pad articulate almost like a bench. Yeah. And it literally helped with his hip hinging motion. It almost gave him some tactile cues on how to use his hips more and not, bend so much through the spine. And I said, why isn't there a bench that you could lay on and do this hip thrust motion on? And that literally was the impetus for the Nautilus glute drive. Now, granted, 2.5 years of, patent, applications and prototyping and research and design and iterations. But it was something that Nautilus was lukewarm about. They said, yeah, this is pretty cool. The head of innovation there, Jeff Diltz, when I first brought it to him and we were talking about royalties and negotiating that, I said, how many units do you think we'll sell in the first year? And he said, well, it's a new piece of commercial strength. It's new to the industry. Nobody really knows what this is. The glutes are cool, but, it's not that hot right now. And I'm like, okay.
Hot? Okay.
He said maybe a couple hundred units. Well, we did over 2,000. The first year.
That's incredible.
And so I think, and to be honest, Dan, some of it is just the vision. I don't know where it comes from. My eyes are open. Like, to me, glutes are super hot. They've always been hot. It's the powerhouse of the core. So whether you're a high level athlete and you want to run faster, jump higher, change directions with more, ferocity and have that eccentric loading on your glutes, you got to train the glutes in multiple planes of motion. There's no better move for just sagittal plane strength than a hip thrust. And so I knew this was going to be a good move. Incidentally, I also noticed on Instagram, all these beach bikini, IFBB pros and all the fitness pros, the gals are doing all these glute isolated exercises. Now, you could say that's not in line with S&C standards or it's all vanity, but I don't care how they're doing it or why they're doing it. As long as they're doing glute exercises, that's what I care about. And so I don't know. I just had this sneaky suspicion that the hip thrust was going to be a hit, and we have them now. I've got a face or an Instagram account. It's at Glute Drive. More of a sales promotion thing. I do some tips here and there, but it's just so cool. I get people posting from Istanbul, Turkey.
That's awesome.
From Ireland and New Zealand and just all over the world. And it warms my heart. Not that I'm selling product, but I'm helping people's health, wellness, and vitality on all reaches of the earth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And from what I know about you, I think what allows you to maybe set up to create these ideas is that you are very present. When you're in something, you are in something, right? So I know when you're working with clients, you are attentive, you're not on your phone, you're present, and you're in the moment. And there's a difference between seeing and looking, and there's a difference between hearing and listening. So I think the fact that you are completely attentive, so when you, right, elevating your client, noticing the AirX pad, you're not just having your client do the exercise, you're in the moment with them, which allows you to be aware. So I think being present and having awareness and understanding need probably contributes to these amazing ideas that you have, because I'm just making a generalization, but I know I've seen back before the pandemic, and I would go into a gym or a strength and conditioning facility, you see athlete or trainers just putting their clients on exercises, counting reps or counting time, and then move on to the next one. There's a difference between doing that and doing what I know you do really well, is being attentive and listening.
Man, I love that you said that. And there's actually a movement now. Young guys like Brett Bartholomew. I don't know if you follow this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he's kind of highlighted something that I feel I've been doing throughout my career, and that's conscious coaching. It's
absolutely
connecting with your athlete and building rapport and trust. And I mean, a lot of these, especially in this S&C world, a lot of folks that you're working with are younger, impressionable athletes. They're developing adolescent athletes, they're Division I athletes, maybe they're young pros. And they need not just S&C, soup and nuts, but they need the intangible stuff of, hey, how do you develop a young man or a young woman into a well-balanced human being? And don't think that doesn't transfer into leadership qualities or to the mindset of a champion that wins. It's part of the game. And every day I wake up, and by the way, it's been a tough stretch, folks. I don't know if you're feeling this, but the last 2 years has just been like ridiculously overwhelming. And it seems like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. I've had issues with business. I've had issues with supply chain issues, launching products. I was going to launch my escape barrel a year and a half ago at URSA. It got canceled. URSA got canceled again earlier this year. And now it's finally going to launch. But, that's 2 years of revenue, folks, for me. That is a huge part of my business.
Yeah.
So I wake up every day and I just look for a sign, something that tells me that there's something bigger out there at play. Right? And it could be a double rainbow. It could be something cheesy and simple. It could be, the other day I'm at the park, I'm stretching out, and there's this young boy, and he comes in and he's got this grin on his face, man. Like, that grin that you can't fabricate. It's just there. And then his dad comes out of the car, and they got baseball gloves, right? They're playing catch. The simplest thing in the world, playing catch with your son. Who cares? I mean, my heart was like alive after seeing that. And then today I got another sign from above that something is bigger at play here.
Ooh, okay.
Mom's right. I don't visit too often. It's been COVID. She's in her 80s, and but now I've been visiting a little bit more, and I couldn't find, for the longest time, my Bruce Lee playing cards. Now, if you're not watching and you're listening, I got
snap!
A deck of Bruce Lee playing cards that have been lost in space for 6 months. Anyhow, that's the kind of sign I'm talking about. That lets me know that something's bigger at play, and that you got to be in the moment and attentive and focused.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that one, Pete.
Hey.
And do you think that being a parent has something to do with that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, right. You're the kid, and I know you're a new parent. And
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I'm asking, because I see things differently now.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a funny story, not to bust your chops, but I've known Dan McDonough for over a decade now. And Dan was the guy that said, I will never have kids, not interested, not going to happen. I'm not the guy. And now he's a dad. And I mean, every single post is like, look at my kid here. Look at my kid here. Look at my kid here. So it's awesome. It brings things into perspective, and it forces you to slow down. And just like last night, I came down, I'm watching, my daughter wanted me to come to her volleyball practice, and I haven't seen her for a while. So I come down, I'm at this volleyball practice, And a lot of parents, and granted, maybe they see every practice. So they're on their phones, they're on computers, they're doing busy work. I'm like, this is so awesome. I'm listening to the coaches, how they interact with the kids. And there's different nuances in the coaches, right? Which is really cool because, again, you have to be, to some extent, a social chameleon when you're dealing with all these different personalities of adolescent females that are developing and playing volleyball and trying to find themselves. And I'm watching my daughter play. I'm watching the interaction she has and some of the technical things I think she can work on. And I'm in the moment, and kids do that for you. But if you don't have kids, you can still at any time snap your fingers and be in the moment. It's not that hard.
It's not.
And by the way, when I train clients up in Aspen, I charge quite a bit of money to do that. It's one-on-one personal training. Of course, I'm a physical therapist, so I introduce some physical therapy techniques and manual therapy and soft tissue massage. But I mean, I'm in it to win it. I'm there 100%, and that's why my retention rate is through the roof. And I've got so many clients, I have to turn people down every week. But they know they're going to get an hour of my blood, sweat, tears, energy, everything I have, whether it's psychology or manual skills or therapeutic exercise programming. They get all of me for that hour. And then, by the way, it's exhausting too. I mean, that's
100%
that Fit Pros. And we all, I can see you all out there nodding your heads like, man, I get done with a 10, 12-hour day. And it's like, I've just given myself. So that's why you got to have that, you know, as Todd Durkin calls it, the mellow yellow time, you know, where you recharge. Dan, I know you go to Hawaii a lot, and I think that's your happy place where you can ride. You can sleep in, you can put your feet, toes in the sand on the beach. You can be with your family and recharge, and then give 110%.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and I think I want to riff off of something that you said a few minutes ago, where you talked about Brett Bartholomew and the art of conscious coaching. I remember when I first entered the industry, I thought all the secret sauce is in the programming. Oh, I got to make the most creative, fancy programming. I'm going to throw in a Bosu ball. I'm going to make them balance. I'm going to make them do a handstand to do something. So, I mean, when I was young, I thought the secret sauce was in the programming. Where I'm at now in my phase of the career is that it's a really small piece of the puzzle. It's more about what you talked about. It's that relationship and understanding need and truly being there in the moment with the client that I truly believe makes all the difference in the world.
100%. And I'll give you a quick story. Yep. So I'm training this young guy. His name's Aiden. He's a football player at Aspen High School, which means he's undersized. He's, outclassed every time they play somebody from Delta or these big corn-fed dudes from the Front Range. I mean, they have their work cut out for him. And he's grown a lot. And so he's got some muscle, but he's just you can tell his central nervous system is trying to catch up to his muscle growth. And on top of that, he's been in a kind of a blanket strength and conditioning program at the high school. And I'm not making any quality judgments on the program, but they don't have as much time to focus on individual details. So anyhow, I'm having him do by the way, he subluxed his shoulder. He actually dislocated his shoulder, and then he subluxed it again. So he's got some shoulder stability issues. So I'm literally just having him do a plank on his hands to build, some scapular thoracic control, some endurance in his glenohumeral joint. And we're about 20 seconds into the plank. I got him set up. He's perfect. Neutral spine. Everything's lined up. And all of a sudden he loses his head. And I say, hey, fix your head. He fixes his head. He loses his lumbar spine. I said, fix your lumbar spine. He loses his head. I mean, he's just disconnected from top to bottom. And then I had to stop him. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? And so I take a video of him. I show him what he's doing. And he's like, oh, I didn't know, I was so loose up and down like that. And so we do it again, and he kind of does the same thing. And I could tell he's just a little bit off. He's not focused. And so I stop him. I say, hey, man, what's going on with you? He's like, I don't know. I'm just, trying my best. I'm like, I don't think you are. I said, hey, let me ask you something. He's a corner. I said, when you got a high-end wide receiver in front of you and the game's on the line, right? And you got to lock this dude down, what thought goes through your mind? And you could tell instantly his brain kind of shifted and his eyes, his pupils dilated. And he's like, they're not scoring. I'm not letting them score under no circumstances. And I said, that's it. That's the attitude we need to have on each and every exercise in the gym. That's what's going to transfer into greater strength and hypertrophic changes and greater neurology and greater rhythm and timing and balance and all the stuff it takes to be an athlete. And then we get back in the plank and I said, lock them down. And that's now our catchphrase is anytime he starts getting loose, it's lock him down. So yeah, it took me maybe 5 minutes to go through that progression, but I think it was the most valuable 5 minutes of our entire session because now he knows when I get pissed at him, all I got to say is lock it down. That's our coach. And he figures out where he needs to be mentally, not just physically.
That's really interesting because what I'm hearing is that you are using different forms of communication and learning style to help an athlete achieve a need or a goal, right? So, but that's what I'm hearing, right? Like how often, when's the last time, if you're watching this, when's the last time if your client or athlete couldn't perform an exercise correctly, when's the last time you got out your phone, videotaped it, and used video feedback as visual learning to help your athlete understand?
Absolutely. By the way, I'm a very, people are different learners. You guys have known, you've heard this throughout your lifespans. Yeah. And you hear it goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But we really are. Some people, I've got people that I show them a move once and they've got it. I've got other people where I have to show them. I have to talk through it verbally. I have to tactile cue them as they're doing the move. I mean, I have to get out balloons and pom-poms. Like it's every trick in the book to get them to execute the move the way I want. But you think about, something as simple as a neutral spine. Well, so this kid says he wants to bench press 250. He wants to squat 350. He has all these goals. He can't even lock his spine down in a friggin' plank. How is he going to do any of this other stuff? So it's kind of like, hey, let's pull it back, reel it back in. I know you want to do all the sexy box jumps and all this crazy stuff, but can we start with just understanding your core, where your bones are in space? And can we create some stability through the spine so that you can then transfer power, energy from low to high up through that kinetic chain or high to low through the kinetic chain. So
that's interesting, Pete. So this makes me think about getting buy-in from your athletes, right? I think we all know as performance and strength and conditioning coaches and personal trainers, sometimes getting buy-in can be difficult, right? You've got these young, hungry athletes who want to squat X, they want to bench press Y, and that's all they're thinking about. And maybe they're not thinking about the long game, right? So besides just being who you are, what are some strategies that you use to get buy-in? Because just hearing you talk and the way you're in it and you're inflecting your voice and you're talking about different strategies, I mean, I'm in, like I've got buy-in, right? So maybe it's something you've learned over time, but how do you get buy-in from athletes who may only have kind of blinders here, but we need them to see here?
Right. Well, I think, relating to them, I mean, part of it is walking the walk. I was on the U.S. national Taekwondo team. I mean, I got kicked in the head 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't make you a competitive athlete, I don't know what does. It's you were a high level cyclist. I don't know if you guys out there have ridden uphill at a 9% grade for 3 hours in a row. It's the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. So we all have and I think most of the audience here have a competitive background. How many of your clients or athletes kind of know who you are and know what your background is? It's not boastful or gloating to say, hey, draw from a memory. Hey, I remember I was in this one race where, this transpired and it inspired me to, I can always learn, I can always grow, or I always have a little bit more juice in the tank than I thought I had. And all of a sudden the kids or the athletes kind of go, oh, I guess I forgot Bob or Jane or whoever their coach who is, I forgot they were a high level athlete back in the day, I think another thing is, also just, trying to, I mean, this sounds corny, but I see a lot of strength coaches that are walking around with a chocolate donut, and drinking a case of beer on the weekends. I mean, you got to walk the walk. If you want your athletes to respect you, come in lean and mean and tight and get your workouts in and, get your mobility drills in. And when you demonstrate a drill, do it like the kid's never seen it before. And they kind of, whoa, coach ain't playing, and kids respect that. I mean, you look at the pro coaches in the NFL, and some of the most respected coaches, and I'm not saying Bill Belichick, but some guys are just so experienced. And so, but some of the coaches, I remember Bill Cowher, he was a coach that I'm not sure he had the greatest coaching aptitude or mental aptitude for the game, but he was so intense, and his players loved him. Unfortunately, Gruden was another coach, I think, and I'm not going to comment on what he got involved in, but the point is his athletes had buy-in to him. One thing that I do when kids are screwing around in the gym, I'll do a side kick like an inch away from their face. Now, maybe most of you don't have that skill set, but it kind of snaps them into they're like, oh, I forgot Holman is a guy that, is to be respected. And you got to put yourself a little bit on that pedestal and say, hey, I'm the coach, I'm the boss. This is what we're doing. And when you say that with confidence, that's one of the things I've noticed. And, to be honest with you, I've struggled with confidence my entire life. I don't know. I was adopted. I don't know if I was raised by lesbians. I had some issues that I had to work through that were relevant to me that I think for whatever reason diminished my confidence. So even today before this podcast, I'm nervous. I'm like stretching in the corner, like, man, I got to get I hope I'm good. I hope I'm this. I'm worried about that. What if you ask this question? Like you have to pump yourself up. When you come with confidence, you get instant respect. People love that. And so if you have to fake it till you make it, like Amy Cuddy, the famous social psychologist from Harvard, says, fake it till you become it, keep faking it. And at some point you really will be that person that has talked themselves into being a leader and one full of confidence.
Yeah. And I think, what's really important, what I've always admired about you is obviously your humbleness, but I think allowing people to see that we are vulnerable, Pete, that we are vulnerable, that we don't know everything, that we're in a constant learning environment. So I think it's in the roles that we play, right? This authenticity, vulnerability, humbleness, and you kind of wrap that all into one. And that just shows people that we are human. And sometimes I think that our athletes and our clients put us on these pedestals that I can never be like that, and Pete's unattainable, and he was a national taekwondo champion. But at the end of the day, we're just people, right? And I think when we can help our clients understand that we're human and that we make mistakes and that we're not perfect, and every day we learn, and that's how we grow, I think establishing that connection is what leads to retention. That's why you don't have clients that leave you, Pete, right? Because of everything I've seen today, and what we've seen today is that extreme confidence to that, I'm nervous, right? And that's cool.
Yeah, I just did a session for this mastermind group. It was like a 30-minute, kind of a quick session, but it was really from the heart. It was something I don't do often. It wasn't about clinical physical therapy or strength and conditioning programming. It was about psychology and mindset. And I put a clip in there. If you guys, gals, know who David Coggins is, he's a ex-Navy SEAL. He's now an ultra endurance marathon runner or endurance athlete and motivational speaker. But before he was a Navy SEAL, he was 100 pounds overweight, and he was really kind of lost in his life. His father was, he had some real issues with his father. His familial background wasn't great. And he was kind of lost, and he saw something on the Navy SEALs on the Discovery Channel of all things. And he's like, I think that's who I want to be with. It was almost like how hard they were on the SEALs and buds, just beating them down. And he felt like that. He felt like, I'm beat down in my life. I may as well go get beat down and have like a greater cause. But he said something, man. He said, the thoughts in your head, you wake up with them. You walk around with them. You go to bed with them. At some point, you're going to act on them. And, this creates your character, who you are. So we really got to think about what we're putting in our head between our temples on a daily basis. And I know there's thoughts of doubt and fear and anxiety. I just mentioned some of them to you, even about this podcast. But we also have to fill ourselves with, hey, I am a strength and conditioning coach, and gosh, I've been doing it for quite a while. I seem to do pretty well in my practice. And, Yeah, I guess I have. It's interesting when you'd asked about what kind of products I developed, and I started listing them out, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm starting to get a nice little resume here. And, and you got to build yourself up, pump yourself up. And that's going to transfer into your effectiveness and efficiency when working with clients. But man, it is a lot about confidence.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to have that hard talk with yourself. The most important conversation you'll ever have is with yourself, looking in the mirror and saying, who am I? What am I about? What's my mission statement? What am I going to accomplish today? How can I elevate those around me today? And that's powerful stuff.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've learned, especially spending time around yourself and Chris Frankel and some of the, the best minds in the industry, is that growth comes when you surround yourself with people that force you to be better, that sometimes don't always tell you what you want to hear. There's a saying where surround yourself with like-minded people, but sometimes that doesn't force growth, right? And the more I know, the more I don't know. I love to be uncomfortable now. So I try and put myself in situations where I'm not the smartest person in the room, right? I try to bring people on this podcast that I've often said that Pete Homan, AKA Cliff Clavin, I've always bugged him for years when you're having a conversation, just the language and anatomy that he drops. I'm like, yo, dude, can you speak to me in English, please? And I say it jokingly, but in all seriousness, I surround myself with people like Pete, like Chris Frankel, who I know can teach me things that I don't know, right? So I think that's really important for growth in our industry. When I was young, I wasn't like that. I thought I was the smartest person in the room, and that inhibited growth, but I needed to go through that, I think, to get where I am today.
So I love this. I was a blue belt in Taekwondo, and I was training at a place called South Suburban Taekwondo. And I was pretty full of myself. I mean, everything the coach told me to do, I did. I grew up playing soccer, and I was a competitive soccer player. And so I think I had really good footwork and really good control of my legs. Mm-hmm. And so the coach would show me a new move, like a side kick, a lead leg side kick, which is pretty hard to do. And literally in the first practice, I kind of had proficiency at throwing a lead leg side kick. And, everybody in the class, I was smearing and sparring when it came to sparring. And so my coach finally said, hey, you got to go up to this other class. there's nothing more I can offer you. So I go to this class up in Lakewood, Colorado, and there's like no short of 12, 15 black belts in this class. I'm a blue belt. There's some big dudes, like grown men, dudes that are 38 years old. I was in my early 20s. And they were construction workers, and like real dudes in there. And I got in there. My chest was tall. I was puffed up, and all of a sudden at the end of class, he called it the gauntlet, and you'd have all the black belts would line up from lowest rank to highest, and you would have to spar only like 30 seconds, but 12 black belts for 30 seconds. And I'm telling you, there was a woman in there that kicked me so hard in the ribs. I like my spine. I felt my spine adjust, like a little, like, oh, it feels better now. And I got my ass handed to me. And I literally thought, maybe this isn't my sport. I thought I was a prodigy. Maybe this isn't for me. And I almost quit. And I talked to the instructor. He said, Pete, it's day one. Like, can you give yourself a chance? Mm-hmm. 6 months later, I was one of the best Taekwondo practitioners in the class. Wow. At least it's sparring, not technically, but in sparring. And it was the greatest lesson I ever had, because this moment of adversity and heartbreak and like, oh, I'm not who I thought I was, my tail's between my legs, was the greatest opportunity for growth in my entire sports career. And it led to me being on the U.S. National Taekwondo team, traveling the world. I was the captain in 1997 at the World Championships in St. Petersburg, Russia. And you start to build these leadership skills and traits that you just don't get unless you've walked through the mud for 20 months.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. A lot of knowledge bombs being dropped here, folks. I hope you're paying attention, right? And I think what we're talking about here, I think this conversation might have started around, is really not about the programming. It's about who you are as a trainer, a coach, and how the experiences that you've gone through and your growth mindset, and who do you surround yourself with. And it just kind of reaffirms what I've always known about you, Pete, and why you've been successful. It's never been, I don't think success has ever been your end game. It's been, how can I solve a problem? How can I solve need? And from that, great things have happened.
Well, I mean, I thank you for that. I'm blushing. But if you look at anybody that is in their light, is in their element, Steve Jobs delivering a keynote, Megan Rapinoe hitting a penalty kick and then sliding knee first, into the crowd, Bruno Mars on stage, getting his groove on. Like, these people are as organic and as authentic as it comes. They're in their element. They're following their bliss, as Joseph Campbell once said. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing greater in the world. And I don't care. By the way, some of you, it's strength and conditioning. Some of you, maybe you're photographers. Maybe you're butterfly collectors. I don't care what you're pianists. I don't care what you're doing. But man, if you're passionate about it, something good is going to come of it. And follow your bliss until the end of this, your last breaths on this earth. And you will be one step closer to self-actualization.
Wow. I love that, Pete. That's amazing. Wow.
Follow your bliss. And by the way, it's not always that easy to do, right? Some people are like, I'm not sure what my bliss is. So here's the homework assignment is you've got to expose. And by the way, I'm doing this with my daughter right now, who's 15, and Dan, young Finster, is going to be doing this, I know, for the next 20 years. But what you do is you try to expose your kids or yourself to experiences in life. I don't care if it's going to the opera or, speaking of the butterfly analogy, going to the butterfly pavilion or taking an art class or taking a cooking class or working on your videography skills, or it's continuing education, taking some FMS, taking some stick mobility, whatever you're into, and just expanding your horizons and finding out you might, by the way, Taekwondo was a happen chance. I mean, I was working in a health club as a maintenance person. I wanted to be a personal trainer, and I started kind of playing with that. And I was studying for my ACE certification at the time. And there was this Taekwondo class in there, and I would be mopping floors, right? The racquetball court floors. And the Taekwondo class was in a racquetball court. So I'm mopping the court across from the Taekwondo court. And I would just, of course, that was the cleanest court in the whole gym, because I would sit there and I'd watch the Taekwondo class. I thought it was really cool. I always admired Bruce Lee. There was something about martial arts that was very mysterious and intriguing to me. But, I didn't really have any I didn't know I was going to get into it. And one day, it was almost like out of a Chinese kung fu movie. The instructor comes over and opens the door, and I'm kind of scared. I'm like, maybe I'm pissing him off, or maybe he's mad because I didn't clean his court. And he said, "When are you going to put the mop down and come train?"
Wow.
And I literally dropped the mop. I said, "I don't have any training gear." He says, "I don't care. Come as you are." I dropped the mop, go across the court, and I started training. And, I had all these doubts and fears, like, I'm not, I don't have the money. He's like, "Well, you're an employee, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Guess what? Employees get half price." And I said, "Well, I don't have the money for a dobak, like the gi that you wear." He says, "Train in your sweats. I could care less." And so I was trying to give every opportunity to get out of the situation.
Wow, yes.
He was giving me this gift of himself.
Wow.
And come with me. I'll take you to where you've never experienced before. And this was just, I finally put the mop down and said, "Hey, this is an opportunity. Let me see what happens with it." And again, it's really created a huge platform for me, even though I wasn't a pro. Listen, folks, this was all amateur stuff. I wasn't a pro kickboxer or whatever, but I competed at a high level for me. And I was in situations that were scary and paramount that I win for my team. I was a team captain. I was forced to kind of lead the team. None of these skill set would have happened had I not set the mop down. So take some experiences and put yourself out there.
I've never, ever heard that story before. And how, how simple, but how poignant. I decided to put the mop down. And here we are. Wow. And I'm sure everyone has that point in their life where something similar has happened, right? Where you faced your fears, you've made the decision, you've jumped into the unknown, and amazing things have happened.
Hey, by the way, there's something also powerful. This mop story is a little deeper. So I'm at Highline Athletic Club. It's basically a YMCA. and I'm a janitor. You know, like my buddies come in and train. They see me mopping the floors. They see me cleaning toilets, and they would laugh. They'd make jokes and stuff. And I really liked my job. I mean, I love cleaning the floors. And then you could hear the racquetball players, like the squeak of their tennis shoes on the court. And I was like, man, that's a clean court. And they would kind of tip their hat to me. I'm like, thanks, Holman, you know. And I didn't mind that stuff. And sure enough, after 6 months, I'd done such a good job, I got a raise. And I was like, oh, cool. Now back then it was like literally making $5.50 an hour. I think my raise was to $6.25. And that was a big deal for me. You know, I'm a young kid. I got no money. And then another 3 months goes by, and the director of maintenance comes to me and pulls me aside, and she says, Pete, you know, you're the best maintenance person I've ever seen in my entire life. You're on time, you're thorough, you smile, you seem to enjoy your job. I'm like, oh, you know, I'm here. This is what I'm doing. She says, you know, I'm leaving. Would you like to be head of maintenance? And I was like, I mean, I was 19 years old, or maybe 20. I'm like, head of maintenance. And I said, I said, I don't know if I'm really cut out for that. And she says, well, it's $1.50 an hour raise. So now all of a sudden we're talking $7+ an hour. By the way, folks, this is back in 1989 or whatever, 90. So a lot of money to me back then. And long story short, I became head director of maintenance. And I was now making, some of my buddies were working on the maintenance crew. I was now making like $2 an hour more than them, significantly more. And then it led into me becoming manager on duty at the health club. And then I became a personal trainer. And all this stuff, you know, is just little steps in the process of becoming a man and becoming a professional and having more responsibility and setting myself up, hopefully, for something bigger down the road.
You know, that's amazing. You know, I forget where the quote came from, but it's like, whatever you do it the best you possibly can, right? Like, be the best teacher, be the best banker, be the best maintenance person, be the best coach, be the best husband, be the best father. You know, hopefully you've chosen to do something that you absolutely love to do. And if you don't love doing it, well, then you probably shouldn't be doing it to begin with. But if you are, right, you've made that choice, be the best you can possibly be at that. I absolutely love that story, Pete. I've known you for years. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because you can experience this on a daily basis. You go into, I'm making this up, a Starbucks or whatever, Walgreens, you know, a pharmacy, something. And we've all had those people that you deal with and you're like, oh gosh, this person's hating it. You know, they're not smiling. They don't engage you. They don't welcome you. You know, here you are, the paying customer, and they're almost pissed that you're in their establishment. Yeah. Conversely, that person that you walk in the door and like, hey, what's going on today? Come on up. What do you need? You know, oh, latte, that's my favorite. Let's go. Latte coming up for Holman, you know, and they're excited about what they're doing. And it's like, that's the person, if I have my own company, I'm hiring them. I'll pull them out of Starbucks. I don't care what their skills are.
Absolutely. 100%.
You know, and those are the kind of people you want in your life. And, you know, those are the kind of people. And by the way, there's days where you just don't feel like that, you know, and I understand that. But man, I use those examples every day. And if I'm a little downtrodden or melancholy, you know, and then there's some kid working at Starbucks for minimum wage and they have that light on them. That's
contagious, isn't it?
It's contagious, man. Be the light in the room.
I absolutely love that, Pete. That's, you know, it's like, you know, hire, you know, surround yourself with people who've got character, great energy, the willingness to learn, because you can teach them those skills that are easily attainable. But some of that stuff is really hard to teach, right? They say like common sense sometimes isn't quite so common, right? But I love that. I love that. Be the light. And you can tell when people have joy and fulfillment in there. All right. I kind of want to wrap this up and we'll try and keep it as succinct as we can. In your role as a physical therapist and personal trainer, you work with a lot of athletes of all ages. You know, what's the common injury that you see the most that has the simplest fix? Does that make sense? That if you were to just do this, you would avoid this.
Well, not to be redundant, but the biggest thing I see in athletes is just their inability to find a neutral spine. And
okay.
Yeah. And so I'll give you one example. So I'm doing some work for TRX. This was back when I was still with TRX, and I was in Aspen and I needed an athlete. And so I got this guy, James Aldridge. And this guy is a bad asteroid. He was a running back at Notre Dame. He's jacked. He's everything, and physically, he's a specimen. You know, like you look at him, and you're like, gosh, I wish that was my physique, right? Mm-hmm. What I could have done with that physique. And so I'm like, this guy will be perfect. I'm going to take him through some rip training, TRX rip training exercises. If you don't know, it's an asymmetrical bar training device, like a Gray Cook cable bar, but with an elastic resistance. And I'll take him through some suspension training exercises. So we're doing a video shoot, and I paid somebody to kind of like video through us. And I said, okay, hey, we're going to start with an atomic push-up. And I show it, and he goes on there. And his lumbar spine was just completely caved in. I said, hey, can you kind of give me a little posterior pelvic tilt and, you know, bring your pelvis up towards your ribs a little bit, ribs down towards the pelvis. And he had it for a second, and then he lost it again. And this went on now for half an hour. I'm basically having to go back to the basics. And I'm thinking, this dude was a Division I football player. He played at the highest level. He's had strength and conditioning coaches since high school. He came up in Texas, it was some southern area where he had, you know, high level high school program. And this guy, nobody ever taught him how to control his spine. What happened to James? He hurt his back. Guess why he stopped playing? Because he had a back injury. Now, I'm not saying that's the most common injury, but, you know, if you lose your neutral spine, and I don't care if you're cutting, sprinting, jumping, decelerating, if you lose your neutral spine, you fall out of balance. And when you lose your center of gravity, that's when bad things happen. You're not positioned to cut back the other way. You're not in position to maintain your knee femoral angle so that your ACL snaps. You're not in position to avoid that opponent that crushes you and gives you a concussion. There's a trickle down. So, you know, the basic things for me is, hey, can you figure out how to do a neutral spine? If you want some stuff on this, go to Dr. Stuart McGill, just do a modified curl up, get a side plank going, get a bird dog going. These 3 basic exercises will change your life working with developing athletes.
Okay, so repeat those again. The 3 gold standard exercises. Repeat those again. I think it's important people note this.
Yeah, so McGill calls them, in fact, the big 3. It's a modified curl up, which is not a crunch. It's not an abdominal crunch, which kind of takes you out of neutral, right? It's just, hey, bringing your ribs down towards your pelvis just a little bit to have that minimal to moderate contraction to help, you know, stiffen up that central part of your core. That's your foundational pillar that you're going to transfer power up and down from. And then the second one is a side plank. A lot of people do not have lateral stability. And by the way, I've seen some ugly side planks in my career in the strength and conditioning world. So clean up that side plank. And then a bird dog, which is on a quadruped position. And it's just learning how to maintain that proximal stability, and then use your arms and legs distally to kind of mobilize and be able to disassociate arm and leg movement from spine movement. A lot of times people, they can't move their arms without moving their low back. Think about an overhead press and people just arching their low back, right? Or think about somebody does a knee flexion move, like a sprinter move, and their lumbar spine just, you know, their pelvis drops into that sacral wink, their lumbar spine flattens out, and they're leaking energy. That's a great 101, you know, energy leaks. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you can't clean up those energy leaks, you're going to have all kinds of problems, not just performance-wise, but with durability and longevity.
I love that. So the whole concept of proximal stability can lead to distal mobility. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've heard that, you know, if you study Gray Cook or Mike Boyle, you've heard this 1,000 times. Do you practice it? I mean, practice it. Go back to the basics. You can't be deadlifting and doing squats and box jumps and all the sexy stuff if you can't have an athlete that understands neutral and can stabilize. Otherwise, they end up like my man with a blown out back, and they're a high level Division I player, and their careers ended short.
Yeah. Oh, Pete, you know, that's and sometimes, you know, simple actually can be better, right? And that's what I think that we're talking about here is some of the basic, simple, staple exercises that have been around for years that are completely still effective and relevant today, but being able to control the body in motion. And I think we've all seen those athletes squatting hundreds of pounds, bench pressing hundreds of pounds, sprinting 100 meters in less than 5 seconds, whatever it may be, right? But they can't do a bird dog.
Yeah.
Or they can't.
And by the way, this is not, I mean, I'm guilty of this. You know, I started to learn to play guitar 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you think? Which book do you think I started with? I got a Jimi Hendrix instructional guitar book. Well, do you think it's appropriate for a novice guitarist to start with Jimi Hendrix? No. And it was the most discouraging thing I've ever done. And it was kind of like, okay, idiot, let's start with some simple, a John Denver chord progression or whatever. And it's this way in anything in life. You start with the basics, you build your foundation, and then you can grow from there.
Awesome. Well, Pete, as I anticipated, time would absolutely fly. And so I just kind of want to wrap up first and foremost by saying thank you on your birthday for joining us today. And some of the big takeaways for me, right, is that we just need to be present. We need to be in the moment. Whoever we're with is be there, be present, right? And I think a lot of times that sometimes we're in moments and in spaces with people, but not truly there. And as you said, it's not going to be 100% every time, right? But if you show up with intent to be there, to serve, to help your athlete, your client, whatever age, whatever ability, to become better, and you have that intention, then I think that intention will be met, right? So that's what I'm getting from you, sir. Right? And that understanding that whatever you do it well, do it with a smile on your face, because you never know what door may open because of that, right? And Pete, thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us today and having our audience know a little bit more about you. As I mentioned at the beginning, you're not just an amazing friend, but I still don't know how your mind works. You start to share that with us today, but you've created some amazing products that will transcend the industry. Was simply just trying to solve a need, understanding there was a gap. There was a gap that wasn't allowing you to do what you really wanted to do with that client. And you've, from the TRX rip trainer to the functional training rack to the Nautilus glute drive to the escape barrel that's coming out to your new golf trainer, right? That's absolutely amazing. And you're an author. You wrote a book, which I thought was really, really cool. So I just want to say thank you so much, Pete. Continue to inspire, continue to do what you do. And I love you, brother. Thank you for joining us.
I want to thank you, Dan. And to your audience out there, I want to leave you with one quote. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. And of course, it's a Bruce Lee quote. In any passionate pursuit, the pursuit counts more than the object being pursued. Ooh. The pursuit counts more than the object being pursued. So whatever your end game is, man, be in the moment, pursue that sucker with a vengeance, and good things will come.
Hey, Pete, on that note, what's Bruce Lee's favorite drink?
Water.
All right, brother. Happy birthday, man. Virtual Knuckles. I love you, brother. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Another edition of VertiMax VIVE. We appreciate your time. We always know you have a choice on where you want to spend your time, and we're grateful that you chose it to spend it with us today. Have a great day, everyone. From my home to yours, much love, health, and happiness. Pete, enjoy the time with your mom.
Yes.
Take care, brother. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.